This place is a maze. I'm starting to doubt anyone actually lives here.
That's the reputation of Felroot Forest. Some believe that it's a den of monsters akin to the Ashwood. In truth, the trees grow so dense that moonspawn have a hard time finding their way deep into the woods. Many of them starve before they find their way out. As far as the wilds go, it's one of the safest places there is.
If you define safe as getting lost for hours at a time, then sure, we're safe.
I know where I'm going. I grew up here.
Well, it seems like it's been too long since you visited. In the past half hour, we've turned back 3 times.
Some of these trees are new.
You mean we're lost?
That's not what I said. These are new trees.
New? Every one of these looks at least a century old.
Last I was here was around 5 months ago. Things grow quick here.
How strange. I wonder what herbs I could find here. Do you know if the growth applies to species planted here as well? If we could cultivate parts of this forest, we could grow medicinal plants that usually take full seasons to grow in mere weeks.
I have to imagine that such a thing would have been discovered by now if that were possible.
You're probably right. Still, it sets the atmosphere, I suppose.
Atmosphere?
This place fits the description of every scary story told to keep children from running off into the woods. A forest so dense that the sun is blocked out entirely. The path forward is an overgrown labyrinth, at the heart of which is a hag living in a hut carved from the largest, most gnarled tree. Charms hang from naked branches, and black smoke billows from inside where she brews her potions, with a raven perched on her shoulders at all times.
Not far off, really. Except the ravens.
No, of course. What was I thinking? Ravens wouldn't go near a witch.
Ravens are bad omens in the eyes of ruined witches. They view it as a sign that their magic is festering. I once arrived smelling of the eggs I'd had for breakfast, and Beah refused to see me until I had completely digested them.
I can hardly blame her. Must have been a real nasty stench. Anyway, you said my description of Beah's home was fairly accurate?
Take a look for yourself.
Wow, I was close, wasn't I?
It was mildly impressive.
Did she make all those warts herself?
She isn't particularly keen on unexpected guests. Would you like to meet her?
Now I'm not so certain.
Don't worry. She isn't likely to place a hex on you. Just don't say anything insensitive.
What exactly counts as insensitive? Dedris?
Are you out of arrows already?
Not quite, but you happen to be between me and Elsbin, so I may as well restock.
How thoughtful. I really don't see why you bother with that drake's nest they call a city. Ooh, and who is this young lady?
This is Elise.
How adorable. But also angry. Like a rabbit without skin.
What?
Oh, hush, dear. You'll understand one day.
I'm not sure I will.
She lost her father on the road. I offered to escort her to Elsbin.
A pity to waste such a young soul in that den of filth.
She'll have work there. She's an apothecary.
In training.
An apprentice apothecary? Well, if you'd like, I can make room in this little old house of mine for one more body. Someone with your talents is indeed useful to have around. I could teach you a few things myself.
Oh, not to be rude, but I think my talents are needed in Elsbin.
You would defy my generous offer? The nerve! You should be so lucky to study under me.
I'm sorry. I meant no offense. Only that... Please don't cast a spell on me. You're poking fun.
That I am, darling. That I am. I truly think you could do better than Elsbin, that's all. I'm sorry. It's not often I meet new people. I'm sure Dedris told you all about my sense of humor.
He missed that detail, but still found time to say you'd put a curse on me if I upset you.
That's a new one. Imagine comparing the woman that took you in and raised you to a night hag. A curse.
I thought it was clever. She missed the joke, though.
Oh, it has been lonely without you and Ederin around to make this old woman smile. You'd best come in. The moon will be ablaze soon.
I've gathered more than enough parts to craft 12 arrows.
All business as always. Come in. Oh, and Elise? Do take care not to touch anything. We were joking before, but some of the contents inside my home could have rather unfortunate effects if handled improperly.
Understood.
I assume you have a healthy harvest for me to pick through.
I managed to salvage some treant roots, needlebeak sacks, an asselgith heart, direwolf blood, frostworm scales, wretch eyes, and wendigo skin. I need arrows and a bottle of your shrouding salve.
I'll make do. I suppose the heart is a rarity, though it has fewer uses than you'd think. Not terribly useful when left out for too long.
I think that's how hearts usually work.
Yes, I suppose it is. I like to get creative with such things, however. Terrible as moonspawn are, I find myself enjoying working with them. They don't much enjoy it, but I don't tend to listen to their complaints.
Beah, the arrows.
Yes. Stand back for a moment. Ferenige virel, Anafis bond. Ferenige virel, Anafis bond.
There's no need to be afraid. She's siphoning power from the moonspawn parts I provided and shaping them into the magic I require.
You and I have very different definitions on what should and shouldn't be frightening. We are safe here, right?
Safe as any rune-guarded city. You have nothing to fear.
I've heard some moonspawn can breach barriers on red nights.
They'd be foolish to do so here.
It's done. What of the other half of our arrangement?
Is it time for the one you haven't heard?
I think not.
What's this now?
My apologies, dear. Dedris isn't the most talkative of fellows when any topic other than his monsters are being discussed. When Dedris deigns to pay me a visit, he reads the words of my son Ederin from that journal. He died in the Queen's War with Eodor.
I'm sorry to hear that. My memories of the war are fuzzy at best, but I know I lost my mother because of it.
All of us have lost something to the war, it seems. 20 years, and still I curse Avalira's name. And before you ask, no, I haven't actually cursed her. If I did that, there'd be no coming back. Ederin dreamt he would be a true poet one day, but war made him a soldier, and battle made him a corpse. Dedris humors me by reading some of his works. An early one, Dedris. I'm not sure I can handle his later works today.
Of course. Of all the creatures I expected to encounter during this campaign, I can honestly admit I hadn't considered the possibility of a Thelodon. Pair that with a snow spine and it made for an unnecessarily exciting afternoon. Talia's disappointed she missed the hunt, of course, although I think even she would have balked at the scale of the beasts. Grayson doesn't much care for scouting duty, and he spent the better half of the day making sure I knew it. Personally, I find it refreshing to be free of the war camp. It always smells of blood and filth, no matter how often we move. That being said, even after these many months, I have yet to grow accustomed to the stark cold of Eodor. I've almost come to welcome the Red Knights for the heat they bring. How Ederin survive in these conditions, I do not know. Their bodies don't know pain, so I doubt they feel the sting of cold. I was in the middle of enduring one of Grayson's stories when we found the tracks. They were massive, more so than my previous estimation suggested. I've only heard of Thelodons in stories before, and presumed their recorded scale to be hyperbole. Grayson suggested we turn back, but we were already hours away from camp, and I wasn't going back until I had the chance to see the creature. He relented easily enough, although he won't admit it. I know he was just as excited as I to see one of the legendary steel tusks in the flesh. Tracking it took the better part of the day. Its stride outpaced ours many times over. To the Thelodon, the knee-deep snow must have felt no more irritating than a layer of dust. If we'd had any sense, we would have given up before long. As much as I abhor the cold, I must admit that Eodor is wonderful. Somehow life manages to thrive on the tundra. Strange branchless trees with ridgeless gray bark jut out of the snow like planted spears. Further inspection reveals that the trees are hollow and long, sinuous plants grow within them before breaking free from the shell near the surface of the snow. The resilience found in the plants and people here is what intrigues me. Truly, it is a shame this war drives a wedge between the possibility of learning from one another. Why must the ambitions of the mighty always trump the reason of the many? Regardless, my own philosophies were at the back of my mind in the moment. The chance to see a Theledon brought me a brief respite from the recesses of my own mind. As much as I enjoy the work I've started, charting Moonspawn is a dreary, repetitive affair. One can only write so many descriptions on how monsters intend to horrifically kill their fellow man before growing numb to the subject. The chance to witness a live Theledon and add it to the Bestiary provided a rare opportunity to explore a creature whose ancestry predates the monster moon. Pity, then, that we found it dead, torn open from chest to hip with a wound large enough to fit an entire command tent. Blood painted the snow in a jagged crescent next to it where it lay. There was no sign of what could have caused such a wound anywhere in sight. At the time, my best guess was a frost troll had gored it and left to fetch something fit to haul the corpse with. I realized this is unlikely, but I'd never seen a snow spine in action and didn't know they were capable of producing such a clean cut. Even in death and carnage, majesty did not elude the creature before me. It had fallen on its side deep into the snow and still towered above me several times over. A brown coat of fur thicker than a sword is long descended from its back down to its black hooves, much of it matted with gore. My heart fell to behold such a rare and awesome creature reduced to meat and bones, soon to be covered and forgotten upon the next falling of the snow. Grayson, being Grayson, decided to climb it. I circled to the front to get a look at the creature's face where a trunk no shorter than 4 meters was sprawled. The end of the trunk hung limp from one of the 4 tusks that protruded at the sides of its mouth. I was surprised to see that the nickname Steel Tusk was a mostly accurate statement. I had assumed that it was a label to promote the proclaimed strength of the Theledon, making them sound far more fearsome to hunt. The protruding appendages were, in fact, made of metal. Frost covered almost their entire length, and one of them was slick with black blood. I'm no expert, but I'm fairly certain it was Skeven iron, which is not found anywhere south of Skulvo's jaw. I wonder if a Theledon's habitat affects the material that forms their tusks, or if it is a hereditary trait. It was as I was jotting down such notes that Grayson shouted a warning to me. Instinct overrode my own desires, and I leapt aside just as the snow beneath my feet erupted into a shower of white and red. I lay stunned for a moment before rolling onto my back to see my assailant. A long, whipping tendril had burst from the snow. The limb was easily as thick as the spear-like trees surrounding us. Noting the pale white skin and the sheer size of the thing, I knew immediately what we were facing. Grayson came to the same conclusion as I and shouted, "Snowspine!" as though screaming was a useful thing to do. The tendril lashed toward me. Amidst the fluffy layers of snow, I could barely find enough purchase to be able to throw myself out of the way. I scrambled to my feet and leapt onto the nearest piece of solid footing I could. This turned out to be one of the Theledon's tusks. The creature allowed me only a moment to draw my sword before stabbing at me with the end of its tendril, which was curved and sharp like the giant hook of some murderous fisherman. I batted it aside, burning runes to help slice through the flesh. Before it had the chance to circle back for me, I turned and fled up the tusk. I reached the end of it and began hauling myself up its trunk, taking handfuls of fur in each hand as I climbed. At the top, Grayson hauled me up onto the side of the Theledon. Right below me, the tendril sheared into the fur, cutting it away as easily as though it were made of silk. I took a step back, allowing myself a moment to catch my breath before assessing the threat. There was just one tentacle lashing out. That likely meant it was a young Snowspine, which meant we at least had a chance of making it out alive. It was as this thought crossed my mind that Grayson cleaved through half of the limb with his axe. The icy runes on his blade hissed as hot blood rained upon them. He looked at me with a grin as the limb flopped back and retreated beneath the snow, leaving behind a black streak. He was about to say something when what I estimate to be 22 more tendrils erupted all around us. They were uneven in length and circumference, but each one of them was more than capable of eviscerating us in a single blow.
Snow spines are rare enough that the most common piece of advice to avoid being killed by one is to pray you never encounter one.
From what I've researched, it takes 2 armies to kill a snow spine. One army lures it out, and the second comes in later to kill it while it sleeps off the meal. Grayson didn't waste a moment before trying to do something stupid. He ran along the Thelodon's back, carving shallow wounds into the tendrils. I stood shaking, trying to conjure up a solution to the situation. I glanced down at the Thelodon's corpse upon which we stood. If a creature so mighty had been slain, how could we fare any better?
I ducked as a limb twisted in my direction. Dodging so narrowly, I brushed against its leathery skin.
I threw up my sword, igniting the runes in a desperate swing. I sheared through a chunk of its flesh before my sword caught bone or cartilage and was torn from my grip. A roar vibrated from beneath the snow, shaking the trees and ground. Then the tendrils withdrew and all fell silent. I stood there gathering my wits for a moment, then realized what was about to happen. I grabbed Grayson by the wrist and leapt into the gaping wound in the Thelodon's side. I won't bother describing the smell or the feeling of landing on the soft innards that remained. Just as we landed in our hiding place, the ground exploded. I couldn't see the full length of the creature from the gash that had been our opening. I just saw white rising higher and higher as more of the snow spine burst free from beneath the snow. We huddled behind a rib, barely daring to breathe. I could feel the weight of the thing as it heaved itself out of the snow, sending tremors with each shift. The tendrils tore into the Thelodon, whipping at it and carving away chunks of meat. It was like being inside a house during a hurricane as it slowly tore open our hiding place. Looking out from the wound we'd entered through, I saw it. Only its head, mind you, for it was so large I could see nothing beyond. White and gray skin streaked with gore glistened in the sunlight. It seemed to cower before the light, but still it towered above us. Its head was shaped like a bulb that ended in a sharp point. I watched as it unfolded like a blooming flower to reveal rows of teeth lining its throat. Tendrils that had cut and skewered chunks of Thelodon meat tossed flesh down its gullet. This relieved me.
My initial worry was that it would tear the Thelodon apart in search of us.
As it happened, the snow spine seemed to have forgotten us in the same way one might forget a bug they were trying to kill after it flies out the door. I watched in fascination as its entire body constricted and twisted to chew and swallow the food. It was as though this monster had no esophagus with which to swallow. Perhaps more accurately, its entire body was one large esophagus. These details distracted me far longer than they should have from its eyes, which lined the inside portion of its head that had peeled back. It almost looked like a spy root, only with hundreds more eyes, all of which moved independently of one another. I would have stayed there gawking until it spotted me had Grayson not pulled me back. I wish I could claim we slew the beast and returned as triumphant heroes to camp. Really, we just waited until it had eaten its fill and gone to sleep. For all the foes I have faced in combat, nothing was so terrifying as slinking past its sleeping body. I was sure with each footfall that it would awaken.
It didn't, though, or I wouldn't be alive to write this account. We did provoke quite the reaction upon our late return. Dedris nearly fainted at the sight of us returning to the camp in the middle of the night, covered in gore. We must have looked the part of some unholy specters.
Jareth had to practically tie Talia down to keep her from going out to hunt that creature on her own. I'm honestly not sure how such a thing could be done. I saw the wound the Thelodon's tusk had left upon the snow spine as we passed. The Thelodon was huge, but to the snow spine, that tusk was no more than a needle. I pray that Talia never gets her chance to fight a snow spine. If we encounter one of those while mobilizing the army, it could end the war in a single afternoon. End of entry.
He was a good lad.
He deserved a better life. I should never have left his side.
If you hadn't, I likely would have lost both of you.
Or neither.
You did what you thought was best.
And every day since, I have contemplated whether or not I made the right decision.
It might not be my place to ask, but what happened to Ederin?
2 years into the war, there was a battle forced upon us during a monster moon. The enemy delayed our retreat and both sides were caught beneath a red night.
I chose to leave Ederin to hold a defensive line with Grayson while I led others to the safety of a nearby cave. When it was over, there was nothing left but butchered corpses.
I could have fought with him. I could have saved him.
It sounds to me like he made a sacrifice by holding the line. You chose to honor it by saving the lives that you did. I'm sure he rests easier knowing you kept your oath to protect your fellow man.
Ederin would have said the same.
That he would have.
I'm going to get some rest. I suggest you do the same, Elise.
You make sure to visit again soon. And bring me something worthwhile next time.
Is there anything you need? We aren't far from Elsbon. I could always stop by with supplies if you need them.
No, nothing like that. But a visit every now and then from someone who isn't obsessed with killing everything that moves does sound refreshing.
I think I can handle that. From how you make Elsbon sound, I'll need an escape from it once in a while.
Just wait until you get a whiff of the place. If you think Dedris has an odor, you're in for a surprise.
That's enough of that.
Stay safe, dear.
The Bestiary belonged to Ederin before it came to you.
It was his way of coping with the war.
Drawing and writing kept him focused on something other than the reality that surrounded us.
If that's how it came to be, when did the necromancy get involved?
That came later, after he lost his hope.
What happened?
Desperation, grief, fear. No one thing broke Ederin, or any of us for that matter. All the forces of war work in tandem to shatter a soul. For today, let us just say that I share the same reservations as Beah about Ederin's later journal entries.
What's the one she hasn't heard?
It's how Ederin died.
He sacrificed himself. You said...
I haven't told her the full story.
There wasn't even a corpse left to bury. At least not one recognizable as Ederin. Grayson was with him when he died. He told me how it happened in vivid detail.
I loved Ederin. He was my brother, and I couldn't even save him.
You love Ederin. He may have died, but he lives on through you. The kind of love you feel doesn't die with the flesh.
I suppose you're right.